Landscaping with. We are recording this so that you can catch the webinar later. It will be on our website. The first webinar is up on our website. It's under our events and under past webinars. So you can find it there if you need it. Just going to wait a second here to see if more people are going to pop on. Just give it a minute here. Okay, we are at 101, and so I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome to webinar number 2, Landscaping with Native Plants. My name is Kim Williams, and I'm the district manager here at the Clallam Conservation District. I am a botanist and ecologist. I have done, led many huge restoration revegetation projects. I'm a gardener. So yeah, feel free to ask questions when I pause. You can either type the questions in the chat, but I will pause halfway through for questions as well. But we are asking that everybody just keep themselves muted so we don't hear the background noise, the random dog or whatever there. So today we are going to kind of dig into the different plants that are available, the native plants, the right plant for the right place. And we're going to talk a lot about different plants and some of the botany on them and some of their conditions and what they require to thrive. So first, I just want to kind of go over why we're doing this. Why are we landscaping with native plants? Well, native plants are best suited for this area. They evolved here. They are adapted to our climate. Now, I know our climate has done some pretty wild swings lately, and so that does change things. But in general, our native plants are adapted to the climate swings that we have here in the Northwest. They're also adapted to our soils, and they're naturally disease resistant. They, resist pests and disease a lot more than, say, plants from China or plants from all over the world, which can be beautiful, but they're just not as sustainable for the garden or for the landscape. Our native plants have evolved here. They've evolved with the local fauna. And there's, a lot of our pollinators depend on our native plants. They're made for each other. And over time, after you plant native plants, after a couple years, they become self-sustainable, which means you don't have to water them and you don't have to care for them or fertilize them, but you can prune them up if you like. You can give them as much or as little attention as possible, which is great about our native plants. So why are we doing this? And this is why right here. This is a picture that is becoming all too common. Our wild places are fractured. We don't have them anymore. There's just a whole lot of lawn. Places, where things are being divided up more and more. And, if you think about lawns, 1 hour of lawnmower emissions equals 100 miles of auto driving. It's not equal carbon emissions to driving. It's actually a lot more. And so, we're trying to reduce our carbon emissions. And so all the more reason to really reduce your lawn area or not maintain a lawn. Lawns are very, very high maintenance. They require fertilizers and water. And the fertilizers, they oftentimes are, they move really quickly with rain, and they flush away quickly, the fertilizers that are artificial, and they get in our water systems, and these can pollute our water systems. So there's just so many reasons to just get back to native plants, to create wild spaces, and that's what we're just trying to promote here. So in the last webinar, these are some of the steps that we had talked about. We talked about doing. We talked about identifying your wants and needs and writing them out. Writing them out is a really great exercise. You can share them with your partner and your kids or the other people in your house to see if they work for their needs as well. We talked about creating that base map on maps.google.com. Really easy to create a base map of your area of your house so you can accurately measure, or not too accurate, but for the most part measure. So really important to know when you go to put in trees, like how many trees do you put in? Do you put in 10 or do you put in 20 in the space you have? And we talked about developing a plan, using that base map, writing notes on it, doing your site layout, putting all the site conditions on your map. Really great. So now that you've got that done, we want to dig into the details just a little bit more to select the plant species that will work for your conditions. So when creating a planting plan, you want to remember that you want to maintain as much existing vegetation as possible. If you have native trees or you want to work around your native plants that are already there, they're already established and they're established there for a reason and doing a good job. We just encourage people to minimize their lawn area. This one is just really a big deal, especially since water resources are scarce and being monitored pretty heavily in this area. Your lawn area should just be practical too. I mean, too big of a lawn area requires hours and hours and mowing and just different needs. So when you think about putting in plants, you want to just really group your plants. You should know now where your soils are drier, where you have sandier soils, or where you have clay soils. Clay soils, you want to put the wetter, water-loving plants and dry plants in the dry areas as well. Just really group your plants based on their moisture needs. And as we go along today, we will talk about heights. You always want to think about the mature height, especially when you're putting in trees. And so you want to make sure and kind of get that right. Once a tree is in there, you don't really want to remove it. And so thinking ahead to the maximum height is really important. And then deciding things like evergreen or deciduous, and really creating diversity is what it's all about. Creating different opportunity for our local fauna, for our birds to get a variety of nesting materials and berries, and places for our bees to overwinter. And just really creating that diversity creates more options for our wildlife. Even on a very small scale, you can do it on a really small scale as well. And just creating any kind of wild place is helpful. So there are some design basics, creating harmony to your area. There's function, fit, and form. So function would be the purpose. So this goes back to your wants and needs list. Is it going to serve your needs? Are you going to be able to do what you want, have a play area or modify the microclimate? And fit, does it fit into what nature has? Like if you have a really shady spot, there are amazing, beautiful shade-loving plants that you can plant, and you really just shouldn't go for the sun-loving plants. And then form. This is kind of the creative, artistic side, where you want to get a different texture and repetition, planting in 3s, 5s, and 7s. Grouping that planting is just really good. And then we're going to dig more into the design details today. What are some of the details? And these are the things that you can write on your base maps. You want to use the structures and vegetation strategically to help define spaces in your yard, creating, screens or privacy, and or which parts of your yard are you going to look out at, and you want to create a beautiful view for yourself, for your own beauty. And creating that balance and rhythm, planting in 3s, 5s, or 7s is really just more of a natural feel, and it gives it so it's not as chaotic and mixed up. And don't forget about focal points, little areas that you might want to be sitting on a little bench, or say if you have a food garden, you want to go out there and sit and harvest some food. And once again, when planning hardscapes and walkways, to use natural and durable materials such as permeable pavement. There's just a lot of new materials out there, and we have quite a bit of options. And using the zone approach. I just want to go over this again. The dark orange there in the center is your high traffic area. That's the area where your hose should reach. So that's where you're going to have your flowering baskets or the things that need high maintenance right there. I suggest putting your food garden in that area. And then as you move out, you just have less maintenance. You get more wild as you go out. And this middle zone is just that transition zone, maybe with little pathways out. And then if you can, have a wild natural area as well. And here is the cross section. Again, what it would look like: high maintenance near the house. This is where your hose reaches. And then that transition zone into the wild, low disturbance, low maintenance, let it go wild. So when thinking about your planting plan, you want to think about the community concept. Like I said earlier, grouping water-loving plants with, areas with clay soils, and the sun-loving plants, make sure that they are in the sun, and considering the mature heights of your trees and shrubs. So when making your design and before you go and purchase plants, you want to think about starting from the top down. Where are you going to get your tallest trees in? You really want to make sure that you start with your larger things and then work down into planning your lower ground covers and your smaller little gardens. That way, you want to get your trees right. If you get your trees right, then pretty much things can fall into place. So we want to create the biggest impact as possible. Each plant should serve at least 3 functions, and that could be food for human, livestock, wildlife, habitat for our pollinators and insects, and maybe you need a riparian buffer because you have a salmon-bearing stream that goes through your property. Or it doesn't even have to be salmon-bearing stream. Our streams and our rivers, they really need to be protected. They need to have shade on them, whether they're salmon-bearing or not. Stream temperatures, all the little tribs, they run into the bigger rivers, which run into the bigger ones. And the temperature, stream temperature, plays an important part in the success of in-stream fish and insects. And so even if you have a section of the stream which maybe dries up part of the season, still having proper canopy over your stream really helps the downstream and seasonally. Our water, it all contributes. Even the small and seasonal streams, they contribute to the health of our rivers and our fish as well. So thinking about all those things and, planting resources for our pollinators, such as flowers with nectar and pollen as well. Just really thinking about that. You know, a lot of our plants that we get from, you know, all over the country, they're kind of bred to not have nectar, not have pollen, not, you know, they're bred just for that big, beautiful color, for very aesthetic visual. And they're not bred thinking about, you know, the interconnectedness and how our insects are reliant on them. So you want to get the right tree in the right place. So I just want to talk about the overhead utilities for a minute. You don't want to be planting real tall trees under utilities or where there may be a utility line in the future, 25 foot or less. You know, we've all seen those chopped up prune jobs, which, you know, you can do, but it's just nice if you just have a flow to things, 25 foot or less underneath a utility line. And then as you get further away from it, you can plant the taller trees, like is shown in the diagram here. So I'm going to just jump into the different tree species and plant species, and we're going to just talk about what they have to offer. Starting with the trees, we're going to start with some of the deciduous trees. Our Gary oak is a wonderful tree that is in this area. It's native to this area. It likes the drier soils. And when you think about your plants, I always want to create the biggest impact as possible. We have what are called keystone species. And keystone species are species that are used by our native species of whatever it is, pollinators or birds or chipmunks, or, you know, they're just tree species that are used by our native insects. And Gary oak is one of those trees that can host a lot of caterpillars. And the reason that caterpillars are so important is because they feed the birds. And, you know, the birds will eat seeds and those types of things, but when the birds are raising their young, they need the soft-bodied insects, and in particular, caterpillars. So Doug Tallamy, he's an ecologist, and he did a ton of studies. And all of his studies are from tree, plant, and bird interactions from the Midwest. And a lot of that applies to here too. He found that over 225 species of caterpillars can be found on a Gary oak tree as a host plant. So that's pretty amazing. That's what you want. You want to like kind of think a little bit deeper, not just your own perspective, but what the birds are needing and how they can survive each season. Our Gary oaks are beautiful trees. They need well-drained soil, dry. They're great on dry and rocky slopes, and they do get up to about 75 feet tall. So not a real tall tree. So they wouldn't do well in a real wet area. And then I want to talk about big leaf maple. Big leaf maple is our tall, big maple. It does drop its leaves in the winter. It's just a beautiful tree. If you have space for a big leaf maple, I say plant this. You need to have a big leaf maple. They can get up to 100 feet tall, and they do host 125 different caterpillar species. They have this amazing bark, which just holds the moss, the epiphytes and other epiphytes, and it's just a great place for all of our insects to live, and it's just their little world in there underneath the moss. What a beautiful tree. So if you have space for a maple, plant a maple, big leaf maple. Then I'm going to talk about our two smaller maples. We have vine maple and Douglas maple. Vine maple is on the top and gets to be about 30 foot tall. It can grow under canopy. It can also handle sun as well. It thrives a little bit better under shade. And if you look at the leaf of a vine maple, the way to tell a difference between a vine maple and a Douglas maple is you count the points. The points on a vine maple, you have 10 leaf points. The points on a Douglas maple, you have, well, 5, but really 3 main points. And that's the big difference. Douglas maple are also a really great maple. It's one of our shorter maples, and that does get to be about 30 foot tall as well. So getting into some of our, flowering shrubs and shrubby trees, the Pacific dogwood, Cornus nataliae, is a beautiful tree, 60 feet tall-ish, right around there. They have the beautiful white flower, and it stays on for several months, and then it drops. This is one tree that is really does really well if you prune it. So you can prune it, you can let it go as wild as you want, and they actually kind of hold the shape pretty well, but it is really beautiful pruned as well. And then the smaller kind of flowering shrubs is we have serviceberry, Amelanchier alnifolia. That's about 10 to 25 feet tall. It's also called honeyberry. That is probably about the sweetest berry you ever did taste, if you can find them. It's generally not really prolific with berries. They have this beautiful white bloom, and they turn a really great golden in the fall. Beautiful. And it attracts tons of birds. Any sort of tree or shrub that has a fruit, you are doing good. That will attract the birds for sure. And then we have Cascara Rhamnish persiana. Wonderful little tree. I mean, the what is it? The cedar waxwings. They're a beautiful bird. They're kind of a fancy bird, I think. They love the Cascara. It has that blueberry there, which is great. Feeds the birds, and it's just a great tree to have. Both of these trees are great bird trees. And the Pacific crabapple, Malus fusca, up to 40 feet tall. And it produces that little cluster of apples right up there that you can see in the top right. Those are probably the most sour apples you've ever tasted. If you want to know the meaning of sour, you can taste one of those. They are edible. They are really great to add into like jams for that nice sour tart flavor. Again, great tree for birds, and they are in the rose family. They have that cluster of flowers up there, and the quail love them, and they do lose their leaves. Both of these trees lose their leaves, and like the Pacific crabapple, in the wintertime, it kind of looks like just a massive mess of sticks. So that's what you get with the crabapple, but a great, great bird tree. And then we get into some more deciduous trees. These are some larger trees. Well, the large trees are the ones such as black cottonwood, red alder, bitter cherry, and quaking aspen. And the small trees, which are our willows, which are shown here in these pictures. Willows are amazing caterpillar trees. They are host to many caterpillars. We do have quite a few more willows that are native in this area than these three are the main ones that I see out there. We have Sitka willow, Salix sitchensis, down in the left corner there. And you can tell Sitka willow when you turn it over, you turn the leaf over, it's very silvery. You know, Schooler's willow on the right bottom also can have a silveryness, but the Sitka willow is very, very silvery. And sometimes it's hard to tell if you don't have them side by side because they're both silvery with lots of hairs, but over time you should, the more you look at it, you'll be able to recognize Sitka willow. Willows are hard to identify, especially when they're younger. It's almost impossible when they're seedlings to identify what kind of willow is what until they get a little bit bigger and they get their fruits. We have the Pacific willow up in the top right. Pacific willow is easy to identify in that it has pointed lance-shaped leaves. And so all these willows are great trees, excellent bird trees, excellent caterpillar trees, and they get up to about 25 feet tall. Everybody needs a couple willows. And the black cottonwood here on the left. Black cottonwood, Populus balsamifera, tall tree, 150-foot tall tree, great tree. This is a good tree to plant in restoration sites because the roots will chase water. And with the Elwha restoration, it was one of our champion trees because when the lakes were drained, the roots just went on a hunt to chase for water. It's a great tree. You get the leaf litter, which is a nitrogen drop into the soil to help build the soil. And red alder. A lot of people don't think about planting red alder, but it's just an incredible tree. It does more for the soil. It's a nitrogen fixer, and it does that nitrogen drop when the leaves drop. And when it's a softer tree, so it biodegrades quicker, so it does fall over quicker. So it's not one to plant around your house. It's more for out if you have wildland areas. You need red alder if you're trying to build up a forest, because they only live they could live up to 100 years, but the 50 years, and then they biodegrade very quickly into the soil. A really great tree to put in. I feel like it's kind of the forgotten tree. They're really important to a forest health. And then we have the quaking aspen, Populus tremuloides. So this one is not really prolific around the North Olympic Peninsula, but we do have it in spots. It's a beautiful tree with the leaves that just shake back and forth, and they grow in clusters, and a wonderful tree to have. And then there's the bitter cherry, the Prunus amarginata, or marginata, however you want to say it. Gets to be about 30 feet tall, and they also grow in clusters like that as well. And once again, that's in the rose family, and it has that great fruit. This little tiny cherry, it actually has a real cherry, pretty bitter. It lives up to its name, but an excellent bird tree. Just provides a lot to our birds and our insects. So evergreen trees. Most people don't think madrona is an evergreen, but it is. It does lose its leaves, but it loses them kind of in succession. There's always leaves on the tree. Madrona trees, they like rocky, dry soils. They have peeling bark. They drop leaves. They're always constantly renewing their leaves and dropping leaves. So they are a little messier. But if you don't mind that, they're an incredibly beautiful tree. They have that orange bark. It's just, incredible. They love rocky cliffs, thin, their roots can they don't have to go deep. They can just grab onto things and grow. And just a beautiful tree. But they don't like the heavy moisture. So if you have an exposed place with not a lot of moisture, great for a madrona. And then we have our Douglas fir and grand fir, our two staple conifers here. The Douglas fir likes full sun. It is not shade tolerant. It does not like to be wet, like overly wet. Like once it's established, it can handle more wetness, but our Douglas fir is really more of a drier soils type of conifer. It gets up to 210 feet tall. It's an excellent tree. It is Pseudotsuga menziesii. Pseudotsuga means false fir. And you know that it's a false fir because the cone, when you look at the cone up in the top left here, it is facing downwards, where a grand fir is a true fir. Their cone faces upwards. True firs have cones that grow upwards like that. So it's kind of an interesting little fact. And just a great tree, great timber tree, the Douglas fir. The grand fir is also one of our tall conifers, can handle a dry to moist site. It doesn't like a lot of wetness, but it can handle a lot more than a Douglas fir can handle. It's 210 feet, wonderful tree. When you look at its needles, the needles part and they're pretty flat when you hold them out. They part like just a hair part right there. They don't cover up the mid stem there. And just a great tree to have. And we have the Western red cedar and the Western hemlock. So I'm going to talk about the Western hemlock first here. Tsuga heterophylla, 210-foot tall tree. It can handle wet and shady sites. It actually prefers that if you're planting it as a seedling. If you plant Western hemlock in the full sun, there is a 90% chance that it'll probably die. It likes to have, it can even handle deep, deep shade. And it gets up to 210 feet. It's one of our beautiful Northwest conifers, but you know, when you're getting it started, it needs to have that shade and that moisture. All of the trees are conifers. Once they are established and are large, then they can handle a little bit more variation, a little bit more dryness because they have, you know, water storage. But, you know, really for them to thrive, it likes the wet, shady areas. And so Western red cedar, Thua plicata, is also a beautiful tree. It's 200 foot, gets up to 200 foot tall. It can handle wetness. This tree loves the wet. It stores a lot of wetness. It does not like dry sites. It's a cultural use tree. It's really important culturally. The Native Americans have used it for everything. There's just books and books and volumes written about this tree. It's just one of those wonderful trees. And, you know, it needs the wetness. It can handle snaps of dry, but not long snaps of dryness. And so that brings us to the Western red cedar die-off concerns. There have been more and more observations in you know, British Columbia and Washington and Oregon about cedar die-off. These are observations that, you know, have been happening for, gosh, like fairly recent, maybe the past 10 years is when I started hearing about it. Because we are having such longer stints of dryness and higher heat, this is what's starting to happen with our cedars. And it's called the Western red cedar die-off. And this is concerning, you know, if our weather is going to continue to snap and we're going to have these heat waves and these high heat, you know, events, this is what's going to happen. When you see a cedar like this, and even back in the woods here, you can see they're dying off, or certain branches and tips of branches are dying. This is usually a result of several years of drought. So by the time you notice a cedar dying off, it's almost too late to do anything about it. And it's just the way things are going right now. It is kind of it's really disappointing, and it's sad because cedar is such an incredible tree. But yeah, when you notice this, it's probably been going through drought stress for 3 to 5 years. So it's one of those things that you don't really see it till years later. Not a lot we can do about it, except plant it in the deep shade area and wet areas. So 2 more of our amazing conifers. We have shore pine, Pinus contorta contorta, great small evergreen right here. It is not, it's usually not real uniform. It grows kind of scraggly. It's great in poor soils, gets up to only 60 feet tall. It's a great tree to plant as a barrier if you have a small, yard, because it only gets up to 60 feet tall and it can handle poor soils. It can handle the heavy wind. Like you usually find them at the ocean or right on cliffs, but they do get nice and scraggly looking and wind blown. But they can also be, more uniform if you plant them in a protected area. A great tree, one of our shorter evergreens, which is really great. And then we have Sitka spruce here, Picea sitchensis. 200 foot tall is its max height, full sun to partial shade. You find it more in the coastal areas. It is a wonderful tree. It's a great tree to plant on the west side of Clallam County, where you have more moisture. It can handle the moisture. It can do full sun to partial shade. It's great to prevent browse. The tips are pretty pokey, and so the deer and the elk who like to browse on evergreens, especially cedar, will get poked in their little noses, and it's a deterrent for them. So it has this great bark here. It's kind of like fish scales is what it resembles and what people call it, fish scale bark. And I just think they have a beautiful cone as well. Right there, also kind of fish scaly looking. So if you've got room for a Sitka spruce, it's just a fantastic tree. Of course, I love all of our conifers. Here are 2 more trees that are wonderful in the landscape. Mountain hemlock. Mountain hemlock is a fantastic landscape tree. I think everybody needs a mountain hemlock because it stays shorter in lower elevations. Mountain hemlock, Tsuga mertensiana, is found usually in the higher elevations, and it can grow in lower elevations as well. In the higher elevations, it can get up to 120 feet tall. Lower elevations, I can't tell you the max height, offhand, but, I'd have to look that up. I don't remember what it is, but it's just it stays conical like this, kind of like condensed. Beautiful. I just love this for like a landscaping tree. And the subalpine fir is also another conical tree. It is Abies lasiocarpa, 150 feet tall. It does stay taller in the lower elevations. It is naturally found in higher elevations as well. And of course, it's a true fir because the cones point upwards. And a few more trees here. We've got the western white pine, Pinus monticola. It is a tall tree, 120 feet, moist to dry sites. I would say more on the drier is better for that one. Great, wonderful, great cone there. And Pacific silver fir, Abies amabilis, 150 feet tall. It likes the moist forests. Great for more west side Clallam County. And I wanted to mention the Pacific yew. This is a slow growing tree up to 30 feet tall, must have the shade. It grows underneath a mature canopy, and it's just a great tree. It has a pointed tip, and it's just a great one to bring in to get some more diversity. It has this peely bark here, but it's one of our smaller evergreens, up to 30 feet tall. It will not thrive in the open. It needs to be planted under a canopy. So that's kind of our trees in a nutshell. And moving on to the shrubs. So here's just a kind of a list of the shrubs I'm going to go over. 2 shrubs, the Indian plum, Ommularia cerasiformis, and red flowering currant. These are incredible little shrubs. They both produce a wonderful flower and a berry. The Indian plum actually has this little cluster of plums. They are edible, but they are extremely bitter. But if you get them at the right time, there's a little bit of sweetness to them, but the birds love them. Some people love them. And just a great shrub here. They're one of the first flowering shrubs. It's such a harbinger of spring. You know, you get to see the flowers before the leaves come out, which is unique. Then we have red flowering currant. Oh, gorgeous. Everybody needs a row of red flowering currant, Ribes sanguineum. They're just beautiful. They attract hummingbirds. Yeah, they bloom in springtime, and then they just are, they're a great shrub. You can prune them up, make them look as uniform as you want, or let them go wild as well. Mock orange, Philadelphus lewisii, is a wonderful, wonderful flowering shrub. It is a fragrant little blossom here, and just great pollinator plant to have. And same with ocean spray, Holodiscus discolor. This one, ocean spray right here, is really great. It has a great shape with drooping flowers that just kind of give this really beautiful look. And one thing to note about ocean spray is that all those white flowers, they are short-lived, and they do persist on the branches through winter. And so they turn dark brown, but it's not a bad brown. But just so you know, that's the look you're going to get if you have an ocean spray in your landscape. And then we have thimbleberry right here. Thimbleberry, Rubus parviflorus. That's probably the best berry you ever did have when you can get them. They ripen very quickly, only for a short time, and then they go mushy, and they're tart and delicious. And yeah, it is deciduous, and thimbleberry has a lot of very spongy pith, which is used by a lot of insects. Insects will overwinter inside the stem of thimbleberry. And hazelnut, Corylus cornuti. This one, I actually have never seen a nut on these, but apparently they do have them because I found a picture with the nuts. But they're just a really pretty tree with these kind of yellow golden leaves in the fall. And apparently they are a fruit tree, but I've never seen one with a nut. If you've seen one with a nut, you have to send me a picture. So, but they do get them. They're supposed to get them. But it's a great native shrub. And here are our roses, some of our roses. We have the bald hip rose right here, Rosa gymnocarpa. This one has this bright pink little flower. This one, Rosa gymnocarpa, is better under the canopy. It's more shade loving. You'll see it growing in deep forests. And so if you have a shaded area, this is a great one. They're not as strong and thick as Rosa nucana, which is our Nootka rose, which makes amazing hedgerows, and is just prolific with rose hips here, and prolific with flowers. Whoop. And yeah, the Nootka rose, it does grow by suckers. So if you plant it as a row, you got to control it. Just a quick mow on the edge, or, you know, have some sort of barrier, because it does grow, kind of suckers out and grows that way. It's aggressive. It's great though. And it's a great bird refuge in there. A lot of birds will overwinter, and little native shrews and bees will overwinter in there. It's just a great little refuge spot. And up here in the top left, this is a combination of snowberry and Nootka rose. Excellent combination to use as a hedgerow. Hedgerows are really great. They just form like a thick hedge, and they can be used as fences. And snowberry is another one that kind of, it suckers out a little bit. So if you've got a nice spot for it, it's really great. Snowberry, Symphocarpus albus, right here, the berry is white and it does stay on for most of the winter. The berry is poisonous to humans, but birds love them, especially the grouse. And so this is kind of some pictures of what snowberry would look like when it drops its leaves. It's kind of this gray mass, not too bad to look at, but yeah, here it is around the bench with all the leaves on it. And elderberries, we have two kinds of elderberries here in the Northwest. Blue elderberry, Sambucus cerealia, is a wonderful plant. It is highly known for its medicinal qualities. That there's just a lot written about it. I'll let you do your own research about it, but everybody should have some blue elderberry on their land. Red elderberry, on the other hand, is not edible, and it is more prolific than the blue elderberry. You don't see a lot of blue elderberry, but red elderberry is everywhere. Both of the elderberries have a spongy pith, which is used by overwintering insects, and just a great native plant in general. And moist to wet sites, we have red osier dogwood. This is such a great one. Oh, red osier dogwood. This is its flower. This is its berry. Then you've got the autumn foliage, which is purple, red, and yellow. And then the sticks in the winter time without the leaves are red. This Cornus cercia is just a fantastic plant at any season. It loves wet sites. If you have wetland area or pond area, or you need, something to, make a nice hedge, red osier dogwood is the one. It's just all around beautiful, and it provides food for wildlife as well. Let's see, as far as height, it does sucker out a little bit, so it is aggressive. And let's see, height, let's say 15-ish feet, 15, maybe a little bit more than 15 feet. Pacific ninebark, oh, lovely plant as well, has this flower with these protruding stamens. It's in the rose family. It has this shredded bark right here, and just another great native plant. And twinberry, black twinberry here on the right. It's got the twin flowers, and which make twin berries. They have nectaries. The hummingbirds use them. Really great plant as well. But the flowers, they're not real showy on both of these. They're a little bit more reduced. And but that's kind of what you get sometimes with the native plants. Evergreen shrubs. So this picture here is our rhododendron. It's Rhododendron macrophyllum. It is our native rhodie. We are going to be offering this in our plant sale for the first time this year. We're bringing in a little bit more diversity. They are more expensive. They are not, you cannot get them bare root. And I'm not exactly sure of the price yet, but this is a lovely plant. Rhododendrons are just made for the Northwest. And if you can get this native one, you can prune it up to have all sorts of cool Japanese shapes if you want. And it's just great. It does like a shadier spot, not the full sun. It can grow in full sun, but it would thrive more in part shade. And we have here evergreen huckleberry, which is a wonderful edible berry. It's an evergreen huckleberry. It does not lose its leaves. It stays green all year round. This one is fantastic. You can prune it up, shape it. You can get berries. You can make a huckleberry cake, which I've made before. So yummy. And just a great all-around plant. And Salal, Gaultheria Shalon, is a lower growing waxy leaved evergreen. We are also going to have Salal in our plant sale this year. It is not bare root. It's going to come in plugs. So it's going to cost a little bit more than our bare root plants, but oh, so great to be able to landscape with Salal. It gets, knee height or waist height. It is a little slower growing though, if you are using Salal in the landscape. And our 2 Oregon grapes. We have tall Oregon grape, which can get up to 5 feet tall here. And these wonderful berries and the blueberries and the yellow flowers. And then we have our low Oregon grape, which is also kind of knee height, waist height, more like knee height. Beautiful, waxy, evergreen. Both of these are slow growing, but then again, I say that, and if they find the place they like, they can really take off and grow. The low Oregon grape does sucker a little bit, so it will fill out an area. And it's easy to keep it under control though. Pacific wax myrtle. This one is a fantastic shrub that can be pruned into a hedge. You can let it go wild. It has fragrant leaves. It's just really a great one for the birds. The birds love it. And I love the fragrant leaves, and it's evergreen. So there's just so much to be said about Pacific wax myrtle. It grows tall. It can grow, gosh, like 10 to 15 feet tall if you let it, or you can keep it small and prune it and shape it if you like that look. And we're going to go over some ground covers real quick. We have, let's see, this picture is false lily of the valley, Myanthemum dilatatum. I think I pronounced that right. You never know with Latin, but so beautiful, shade loving false lily of the valley. Gets those flowers, and little bit hard to get started. It does not like its roots disturbed, but oh, such a beautiful, great, like in a deep forest with a deep canopy. And 2 more ground covers. We have Kinnikinick, Arctostaphylos uva ursi. That one's fun to say. Waxy, hard leaves with this berry here, or bearberry. The bears like to eat it. It's also high in vitamin C for people as well. But before you eat anything, you need to make sure you 100% know what you're eating. And yeah, so I don't recommend eating any wild plant unless you know 100%. So yeah, a great ground cover though, slow growing. Most of these, these are slow growing. Also needs to have part shade, or full shade to part shade as well. Well, it can grow in the sun too, actually. I think it's, I've seen it in the sun quite a bit too, and on the forest edges. So part shade, I would say. And our strawberries, we have different wild strawberries, which are Fragaria is the genus, and these grow great. These are wonderful. I wouldn't say that the strawberries are a thick ground cover. They're, kind of thin. They're great to intermix with things. But yeah, another one that does produce an edible berry. And just some ferns really fast. Both of these ferns are going to be available in our plant sale. We have limited quantities, and these are some of our new varieties we're bringing in. The sword fern, Polystichum munitum, something like that. Right here, this is the evergreen fern. It can get, 3-4 feet tall or even taller. I've seen it. When it thrives in a forest, it can handle the deep shade. It can handle some sun. It will be a little bit more stunted in the sun, but it is our evergreen fern and will be available this year for the first time in our plant sale. And same with oak fern. This one is a little bit more delicate fern, and it can get up to maybe a foot tall. It does die back, so it's not evergreen like the sword fern. The sword ferns are big, masses of leaves, and these are just a lot smaller, a little bit more delicate, beautiful if you have a little shade garden. Oak fern. And we have bunchberry, Cornus canadensis, right here. Lovely little ground cover related to dogwood, has that dogwood flower. And then twin flower, Linnea borealis. Wonderful little climber, kind of clambers all over everything. Both of these are shade loving though, or forest edge, so partial sun, but definitely not full sun. And we have the wild ginger, Asarum caudatum, and French cup right here, this upright French cup, Tolema grandiflora. So the French cup, this upright one, is used by hummingbirds, and it's really great to see the hummingbirds come in and, pollinate the forest flowers. And the cool thing about the ginger here, this purple flower, is the wild ginger, and also has the heart-shaped leaf here. It is pollinated by ground insects. So, because this flower lays against the ground and is pollinated by beetles and different ground insects. It is a cool flower. If you ever see this wild ginger, lift up the leaves and try and find the flower in the spring or summer even. They stay through summer. And we have the wild violets here, and wonderful little masses of little yellow violets. So I know you can't see these charts very well, but these are some of the keystone species. And there's on these charts, it shows the different number of caterpillar species that use the host plant. So I will be sending these out to everyone so you guys can look at them a little closer. Like the white oak, the oak on the top has 436 species of caterpillars that use that plant. And going down, like the acers, which is the maples, the Rocky Mountain maple, the big leaf maple, that is 238 species of caterpillars that use that plant. So yeah, I'm going to be sending these out to you afterwards so you can look at them closer, and it really can just help you decide if you're trying to decide between two plants. Okay, which plant is going to bring a more positive, better impact to our wildlife? And here, same thing. These are different species of plants for butterflies and moths, and also bees as well. So they're just really interesting to look at. And it can really just help you. Like the Douglas fir can host 122 species of caterpillars. So it's important to know. Definitely there are some trees that host more species of insects and caterpillars than others. I wanted to mention our native grasses. So none of our native grasses really create that thatch. They don't really create that, you know, thick grass that you see for a lawn. But incorporating native grasses is really fun and they're really beautiful. We have all these different kind of species right here. That blue wild rye, Elamis glaucus, is like a wonderful native grass. It's just, it doesn't create that thickness though that you look for when you think of a lawn. It's like none of these, some of these are clumping style and they just wouldn't be good for a lawn, but they're great for little meadow areas. Like if you want to have a space where you have a meadow, that is wonderful. We've got the Dischampsia cespitosa, tufted hairgrass, and fescue, and different sorts of red fescue. The red fescue is shorter growing, and then Carex obnupta. That is a carex, and it is not really a grass. It is a wetland plant. So I just wanted to, there's options out there. Let's see, Northwest Meadowscapes is a wonderful place to get native grass seed. So it's just a great spot. And it's really fun to put in some of your native grasses. But just know that our native grasses are not as aggressive as our invasive grasses or our lawns. And there's just little things that you can do. These are just some design options showing you how to do little fences and make a little path just to show that you are actually, it's not just throwing all these wild native plants out there, but you're actually caring for them. And I just think that the rocks look so beautiful right here. And then mulch heavy on any of your walkways so that weeds do not grow. Any mulched area will get weeds, and we recommend putting mulch on twice a year. It's a temporary thing, mulch is, because it biodegrades, but yeah, it can be just so pretty. Or you can mulch really thick. You can mulch 6 inches, something like that, but it will biodegrade over time and it should be replenished every year. And I talked about EcoTurf last time, but I just wanted to mention it again as we're just pretty committed to reducing lawn areas. EcoTurf is a great way to have that open space. It creates pollinator habitat. It cannot handle high traffic. If you're going to have a high traffic area where people are walking on your lawn area, you might want to just put in, a non-native, low-grow, low-moisture grass seed. But these things like hardy dwarf turf grass, clover, yarrow, English daisy, sweet alyssum, and Roman chamomile make wonderful ecoturf. And it would need to be mowed maybe 1 time a year, and just a really great, just to create more pollinator habitat. And it gives you that wide open space. And real quick, I wanted to talk about planting on a septic. So right here, this mound is a septic, and this is a picture of someplace local, and they've chosen lavender, which is perfect. It's in full sun. Lavender does not have deep roots. Full sun perennials, you could do yarrow and lavender, or you could do any of the ground covers that I had mentioned. If you have sun or shade, or if you have shade, especially, kinnikinnick and sweet woodruff is also another one. It's another option. And then low root perennials such as Solomon seal, trillium, lily of the valley, and false lily of the valley as well. But you can plant on your septics, but you want to keep trees 30 feet away at least from your drain field. And here's just a picture of some options. I thought it was so pretty. This bottom left is, we've got a whole bunch of the skunk cabbage, which is really great. I love skunk cabbage. So as you shape your planting plan, this is kind of how you can lay it out. You can put like, okay, I think I want some Douglas firs. I have a place here where I can have a 210-foot tree maximum height. So you just put Douglas fir, Douglas fir, Douglas fir, 3 Douglas firs, and we've got some, Indian plums down here. You want to have more of a view, or down here at the pond is more of a wet area. You can really start placing your species onto your planting plan. That's just kind of an example of what it might look like. And leaving habitat for our wildlife is super important. Even if you only have like a small lot, leaving little piles of sticks and wood here like this. Birds love this. They overwinter here. The bees will overwinter here. Our birds probably won't overwinter, but they will find protection here in these little brush heaps. You can create little brush heaps behind things, leaving snags, which are the dead trees, perfect for woodpecker habitat. And the bees, our bees are just in peril right now. They're in decline. A lot of our bees are ground nesting bees, and they need little refuge spots. They've been declining because we have loss of wildflower pollinator plants, lack of like hedgerows, protection areas where they can, dig in to the ground, and destruction of our woodlands. So if we can just like leave some for the birds and the bees, that'd be great. That's not just a Joni Mitchell song, but it's real. So anything we can do to get more pollinators planted. I just want to say that we have a volunteer opportunity coming up. We have a partnership with Clallam County Noxious Weeds, where they are planting pollinator plants. And this is next week. It's on Deer Park Road, November 15th and 17th. 2 different days, 9 o'clock to noon. You can come out and help plant pollinator plants. So we need people to sign up. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities through the district. We've been doing a lot of planting events lately with our orca recovery, but we love to partner with people. And Clallam County Noxious Weeds, they just need help planting these areas right around the Deer Park Road. So we will, in the chat, there should be a link. Here's the link. Yes, Megan put it in the chat to sign up to volunteer. If you want to get out and plant some pollinator plants, we need you. We need people to sign up. Our pollinators love roadways for some reason. They love the wide open. They like to fly. They're like fly corridors. And so it's just a great place. As they eliminate the noxious weeds, they want to replace the plants with something that the native pollinators can use. So I encourage everyone to get out and help for just 3 hours and plant some plants. Okay, let's see here. And for some reason, I can't advance it. Hold on here, as I'm getting some technical difficulties. For some reason, I'm not advancing. There we go. I had to find the right button. So get out in nature. I just want to say, get out in nature, observe what's out there, become a botanist. Get this book. Everybody should get this book, Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast by Pojar and McKinnon. It is just chock full of information, indigenous uses, and all of our native plants. It is the most common native plants in this area. It'll teach you how to identify them. It'll give you some history on the plants. It's just one of the best. Like, everybody should have Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast by Pojar and McKinnon in their library. For more information, you can always check our website. We have all sorts of things going on. We provide technical assistance and financial assistance for tons of programs to protect our natural resources. We, help with water quality issues. We help our farmers with livestock and horse issues, managing pastures and mud management, manure management. We help to put in riparian forest buffers on salmon-bearing streams. There's just so much. Check out our website. We offer these courses in April and November, and we have our first walk on Monday. That's this Monday at, so the first walk is going to be this Monday, 1 to 3, no, I'm sorry, the 14th, 10 to 12 at Peninsula College. This is an ADA accessible walk. It's got ramps and pathways and walks, it's just an easy walk, and we'll discuss, we get out and look at the native plants, learn some identification factors, and really just get to see the plants and see how they're positioned in the landscape as well. The Peninsula College, they do a really good job landscaping there. So with that, I will just see if there's any questions. And boy, I did say I was going to break, and I didn't. I just kept going, didn't I? Anyway, you can unmute yourself, or I can check the chat. Okay, where are we meeting for the walk? I will be sending out, along with my Keystone Plants, a map just right there, just right off the parking lot right in front. And I'll be out there with a sign, and yeah, that's where we're meeting. I'll send it out to you. I'll send a map so everybody knows. I've got that ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to just read through some of these questions. Okay, we have a link in the chat to view last week's webinar. If you're interested, if you missed that, or if you want to review some things. Suggestions for putting in mix of shrubs, trees that will survive deer. Yes, so the deer are they're a problem. They're our native natural problem, and definitely not cedars. Deer and elk love cedars. Trees, most of our conifers will survive deer. We also suggest putting tree protectors around the newly planted seedlings. And let's see, Megan, I hate to ask you, but I can't remember where you can get the tree protectors. You had a place you could get them.
Yeah, I'll put in the chat. Pack Forest Supply is where we typically order our protectors from. So I'll go ahead and throw that link up. And there's other places for sure. We just usually get their blue 18-inch Pack Forest Pro Tube is what it's called.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm the one that actually put that question out, and I have an area that is wildlife on the side of the road. My next door neighbor feeds the deer, so there's not a lot I can do. I have up to 18 deer a year in the own little thing, but I also want to keep area for the quail and things like that. And there is a lot of scrub and some apples and a pie cherry tree there, but I wanted to put like the service berries and stuff like that, and I'm not sure how to build it up with the deer not decimating everything.
Yeah. So boy, plant protectors are definitely a way. They can handle browse, when they're older.
Yeah.
Keeping them protected when they're young is just really, especially if your neighbor feeds the deer, or you can put a little deer fencing around it. I don't know if that's, it's too big of an area to do that. Sometimes that's pretty labor intensive. Deer fencing is really good. Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry that your neighbor feeds deer, because That's hard. But next webinar, I am going to be going more in depth about deer and some of the common pests and invasive weeds, things like that. You know, spruce weevil, things like that. I'm going to go into that. There's deer off sprays that I tried them. They work. There's some that last, but you can't, they're usually safe and edible, but they stink. So like if you spring it on a berry tree or berry shrub, I wouldn't want to eat them because, you know, they taste like mint or something. And so, yeah, deer are just a constant, you know, thing that you would have to deal with. There are certain things like snowberries are great, you know, and the dogwood is a good one. The red osier dogwood.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So what is the best time to transplant perennial shrubs and flowers? I bought some, but due to dry summer, I never planted them. Should I overwinter in the greenhouse and wait until spring to transplant in the ground? Best to plant when things are dormant, which is winter. When it's wintry, you know, not when it's frozen ground. You gotta have it when it's like rainy and wet, like February, March, or even right now, November, December. January can sometimes be frozen ground, but we always plant when things are dormant because you don't want to disturb the roots too much. And so a lot of people think, oh, we're going to spring plant, but by the time everything's growing and wonderful, it might make it, but it is a little bit late for getting native plants established. You want to plant them before the roots start growing. So that's kind of a way to gauge it. Yeah, so I'm looking in the chat. We talked about the protectors. Protector. Okay, and then someone put in, oh, Megan, you put in some pack forest and tree protector and repellent. Okay, good. So were there any questions that I didn't get to or that someone wants to unmute and talk about? Okay, well, if you have any questions, you can send me an email. I'm looking forward to our walks. We can get out there. I can show you some different identifying factors of plants and how to identify them during the winter. Get a little winter botany in, and you can see what they look like out in the real world, which you may already know, but it's always fun to get together and walk.
Will you also be sending a printout of the chat so that we can see these links and I don't have to try and copy everything down real time?
Yep, we can do that.
I also didn't see a link to last week's and I had to sign out half an hour early.
Okay, let's see. It is in the chat. So we will make sure, and I'll send that out also.
Okay, thank
Make
you.
note of that. Yeah. Thanks, you guys. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next week. We're having both walks next week and also another webinar. So have a wonderful long holiday weekend. Get out and do some botanizing. Thanks, you guys.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We bought several trees